They denied her access to her life's work right to her face. The security guard's hand hovered near his taser. The manager smirked behind bulletproof glass, all before realizing they were about to kick out the woman who signed their paychecks. The question had gnawed at Sophia Reed for months. Was her hospital truly serving everyone equally? As chief medical officer and founder of Reed Memorial, she'd built policies around equal care regardless of appearance, background, or ability to pay. But rumors persisted. Whispers from colleagues about certain patients receiving different treatment in certain departments. Today, she would see for herself. No white coat, no designer clothes, no ID badge swinging from her neck. Just faded jeans, an old sweatshirt, and worn sneakers. Sophia pushed through the sliding glass doors of the emergency department, the same doors she'd specified in the architectural plans 5 years ago. The antiseptic smell hit her immediately, familiar yet somehow different from this side of the counter. A young receptionist glanced up briefly before returning to her screen. No greeting, no acknowledgement. Sophia approached the desk. "Excuse me, I need to see a doctor." The receptionist, Melissa, according to her badge, didn't look up. "Fill this out." She slid a clipboard across the counter. Sophia took the form and a pen, noticing a man in a business suit being greeted warmly at the other end of the desk. The difference was subtle but unmistakable. She completed the form, noting her symptoms as persistent chest pain radiating to her left arm. Textbook warning signs any medical professional should flag immediately. She returned the clipboard. Melissa glanced at it, then at Sophia. Something changed in her expression, not concern for the symptoms, but something else, something colder. "Insurance card and ID," she said. Sophia handed them over. The receptionist studied her ID for a beat too long, eyes narrowing slightly. "Have a seat. It'll be a while." "How long?" Sophia asked. "These symptoms." "We're very busy today." Melissa cut her off. "The wait could be several hours." Sophia glanced around the half-empty waiting room, then at the businessman who had arrived after her. He was already being escorted through the security doors. "That man just arrived after me," Sophia pointed out. Melissa's face hardened. "Sir Johnson is a regular patient. We have his information on file." "But my symptoms—" "Please take a seat." Sophia didn't move. Chest pain with left arm radiation is a cardiac warning sign. It requires immediate triage. Melissa sighed dramatically. "Ma'am, I understand you're uncomfortable, but everyone thinks their problem is an emergency." "This isn't about comfort," Sophia said. "It's about protocol." "I'll need to speak with my supervisor," Melissa said, picking up the phone without breaking eye contact. A minute later, a door opened and a middle-aged man in a press suit emerged. His nameplate read, "Richard Powell, Operations Manager." Sophia recognized him immediately. She'd interviewed him herself 2 years ago. "Is there a problem here?" Richard asked, not recognizing Sophia in her casual clothes. "This woman is insisting on immediate care," Melissa explained. "She's being difficult." Richard turned to Sophia, his expression professionally neutral but his tone condescending. "Ma'am, I understand you're concerned, but we have protocols." "I described chest pain with left arm radiation," Sophia interrupted. "Your protocols state that requires immediate cardiac evaluation." Richard's eyes narrowed. "Are you in the medical field?" "Yes." "Well, with all due respect, we handle hundreds of patients who come in claiming emergency symptoms to skip the line." Sophia felt her pulse quicken. "Are you suggesting I'm lying?" "I'm suggesting," Richard said slowly, "that we've seen this before. People read symptoms online. So you're refusing to follow triage protocols based on what exactly? How I'm dressed? How I look?" Richard's smile tightened. "That's not what I said." "Then what are you saying?" "Security," Richard called over his shoulder. A guard approached, hand resting near his taser. "This woman needs to calm down or be escorted out," Richard explained. The security guard, a burly man whose tag read Tyson, positioned himself beside Sophia. "Ma'am, let's not make a scene." Sophia looked between them, disbelief washing over her. You're threatening to remove a patient reporting cardiac symptoms instead of following your own protocols? We have the right to refuse service to anyone disruptive, Richard said flatly. Disruptive? Sophia repeated. I'm asking to be triaged according to your own written policies. Ma'am, final warning, Tyson said. Either take a seat and wait your turn, or I'll have to escort you outside. Sophia took a deep breath, then reached into her bag. Both men tensed. She pulled out her phone and hospital ID badge. I'd like both your full names for the record. Richard crossed his arms. Recording isn't permitted in this facility without consent. I'm not asking for your consent, Sophia said calmly. I'm informing you that I'm documenting this interaction. Richard glanced at Tyson, then back at Sophia. You need to leave now. Before I do, Sophia said, you should know who you're throwing out. She held up her ID badge. I'm Dr. Sophia Reed, Chief Medical Officer and founder of this hospital. The color drained from Richard's face. Tyson's hand dropped from his taser. Melissa froze at her desk, mouth slightly open. And you, Sophia continued, just violated every principle this hospital was built on. The silence that followed seemed to stretch forever. Richard's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for water. Tyson took 2 steps back, suddenly fascinated by the floor tiles. Melissa's fingers hovered over her keyboard, frozen in place. Dr. Reed, Richard finally managed, his voice cracking. Sophia cut him off. Don't! Her voice was steel. There's absolutely nothing you can say right now that I want to hear. She tucked her ID back into her pocket but kept her phone recording. The emergency room had gone quiet. Patients in the waiting area watched the scene unfold, some pretending not to notice, others openly staring. What I want, Sophia continued, is for you to explain why a patient presenting with textbook cardiac symptoms was denied immediate triage. Richard swallowed hard. There was a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding. Sophia's eyebrows shot up. Let me be clear about what just happened. I presented with chest pain radiating to my left arm. Instead of following protocol, you called security. She turned to the receptionist. Melissa, what's the protocol for chest pain with arm radiation? The young woman's face had turned chalk white. Immediate triage and ECG within 10 minutes of arrival. And did you follow that protocol when I came in? Melissa's eyes dropped to her desk. No, ma'am, Sophia nodded slowly. At least you're honest. She turned back to Richard. So I'll ask again. Why was protocol ignored? And don't tell me it was a misunderstanding. Richard's professional demeanor crumbled completely. Dr. Reed, please, I can explain. No need, Sophia said. I saw exactly what happened. You looked at me, my clothes, my appearance, and decided I wasn't worth the same care as others. She gestured toward the businessman who had been escorted in earlier. That man came in after me. What were his symptoms? Richard hesitated. Seasonal allergies, Melissa said quietly from behind the desk. Runny nose and watery eyes. A ripple of murmurs spread through the waiting room. Sophia felt her anger crystallize into something colder, more focused. Seasonal allergies, she repeated. He gets immediate care while cardiac symptoms are dismissed. Tell me, Richard, if I'd come in wearing a designer suit instead of this sweatshirt, would we be having this conversation? The silence was answer enough. Sophia turned to the security guard. And you, Tyson? You were ready to physically remove a patient reporting emergency symptoms because, what, I wasn't compliant enough? I asked too many questions? Tyson shifted uncomfortably. I was just following orders, ma'am. Following orders, Sophia echoed. The last defense of people who know they're doing something wrong. She pressed her palms flat against the counter, leaning forward. Here's what happens next. I'm going to walk through those doors. She pointed to the treatment area, and personally review every case that's come through this department today. I want to see who was prioritized and who was made to wait. Richard's face went from pale to gray. Dr. Reed, that's not necessary. It's absolutely necessary, Sophia cut in, because if this happened to me, the person who founded this hospital, What's happening to people who don't have the power to fight back? She straightened up, addressing the entire room now. This hospital was built on a promise: equal care for everyone who walks through those doors, not just the ones who look like they can afford it. A few patients in the waiting area nodded. One woman quietly applauded. Richard took a step forward, lowering his voice. "Dr. Reed, please, not in front of patients." "Why not?" Sophia challenged. "They deserve to know what's happening in their hospital." She turned to face the waiting room fully. "To everyone here, I apologize for what you've witnessed. This is not the standard of care this hospital was built to provide. I promise you, this will be addressed." Then she swung back to Richard, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "And you've got exactly 30 seconds to pull up my information and get me to triage, or you'll be explaining to the board why the chief medical officer was denied care on your watch." Richard practically sprinted behind the desk, fingers flying over the keyboard. "Right away, Dr. Reed. I'll take you back personally." Sophia held up her hand. "No, I want to be processed exactly according to protocol. Melissa will enter my information correctly, and a triage nurse will assess me, just like they should have done from the beginning." Within minutes, a nurse appeared, apologizing profusely as she escorted Sophia back. But this wasn't over. Not by a long shot, because Sophia had seen enough to know this wasn't an isolated incident. As she followed the nurse through the security doors, she caught Richard frantically whispering to Melissa, likely trying to cover their tracks. But it was too late. The recording on her phone had captured everything. And tomorrow, the entire hospital would feel the shockwave of what had happened here. In the treatment room, Sophia sat on the examination table as a terrified resident performed an ECG with trembling hands. Of course, her heart was fine. She'd never been experiencing symptoms. But the damage to the hospital's heart, its core values, was real, and she was already planning how to repair it. "Are you experiencing any pain now, Dr. Reed?" the resident asked nervously. Sophia fixed him with a steady gaze. "The only thing that hurts is seeing what my hospital has become. But I'm going to fix that, starting tonight." By 7 a.m. the next morning, Sophia had already called an emergency meeting of the hospital's executive board. The conference room buzzed with tension. Department heads and board members exchanged nervous glances as they took their seats around the polished table. Richard sat at the far end, tie askew, eyes bloodshot from a sleepless night. Sophia stood at the head of the table, her usual tailored suit back in place, but her expression harder than anyone had ever seen it. "Last night," she began without preamble, "I witnessed firsthand what happens when we fail to live up to our mission." She placed her phone on the table and played the recording. The room fell silent as they listened to the entire interaction, the dismissal, the threats, the revelation. When it ended, no one spoke. Several board members couldn't meet her eyes. "This isn't just about one bad night or one bad employee," Sophia said. "This is systemic. It's happening in our emergency room, our clinics, probably throughout the hospital." Dr. James Wang, Chief of Emergency Medicine, cleared his throat. "Dr. Reed, we have strict protocols." "Protocols mean nothing if they're selectively enforced," Sophia cut in. "The data doesn't lie, James. Last night I pulled the ER records for the past 6 months. She slid a folder across the table. Average wait times are twice as long for patients from certain zip codes. Triage priorities are being consistently ignored for specific demographics. Pain management differs dramatically depending on patient profile. The room temperature seemed to drop as the implications sank in. "This stops today," Sophia said, her voice leaving no room for argument. "I'm implementing immediate changes." She turned to Richard, who shrank in his seat. "Mr. Powell, clear out your desk. Your employment is terminated, effective immediately." Richard opened his mouth to protest, but Sophia wasn't finished. "The receptionist will be placed on administrative leave pending retraining, and every staff member, from janitors to surgeons, will undergo mandatory bias training starting next week." Dr. Wang shifted uncomfortably. Dr. Reed, with all due respect, one incident. This wasn't one incident, Sophia said sharply. This was just the one time someone was watching. How many patients have suffered or even died because we decided their emergency wasn't important enough? The question hung in the air like smoke. Beyond training, Sophia continued, I'm implementing a blind initial assessment system in the ER. Symptoms will be entered and prioritized before patient details are visible. We're installing recording systems at all intake points, and I'm creating a new position, patient advocate, with representatives in every department. She looked around the table, making eye contact with each person. And for the next month, I'll be conducting random audits. I'll be showing up unannounced, no white coat, no ID badge, to see how patients are really being treated. The chief financial officer raised a tentative hand. Dr. Reed, these changes will be expensive. Not as expensive as the class action lawsuit we'll face if this continues, Sophia replied coldly. Not as expensive as losing our accreditation. Not as expensive as betraying everything this hospital stands for. She picked up her phone, sliding it back into her pocket. I built Reed Memorial to serve everyone with dignity and respect. Somewhere along the way, we've lost sight of that mission. Sophia walked to the window, looking out at the hospital campus she'd created from nothing. Each of you has two choices. Commit to these changes and be part of the solution, or clear out your office by the end of the day. She turned back to face them. Because I'd rather shut these doors than run a hospital that treats people as less than human based on how they look or what they wear. Over the following weeks, the changes rippled through Reed Memorial like a shock wave. Some staff resigned rather than adapt. Others embraced the new direction, relieved that someone had finally addressed the elephant in the room. Sophia personally oversaw the training, sitting in on sessions, participating in discussions. She appeared unannounced in waiting rooms, clinics, and emergency departments, sometimes in scrubs, sometimes in casual clothes, always watching. 3 months later, the data told the story. Wait times had equalized. Patient satisfaction scores had improved across all demographics. Staff reported higher morale. On a quiet Tuesday evening, Sophia sat in her office reviewing the latest reports when a knock came at her door. It was Melissa, the receptionist from that fateful night. Dr. Reed, do you have a minute? Sophia gestured to the chair across from her desk. Of course. Melissa sat, hands fidgeting in her lap. I wanted to thank you. Sophia raised an eyebrow. For what? For not firing me that night, for giving me a chance to learn from my mistake. She looked up, meeting Sophia's eyes. The training, it made me see things I never noticed before. About myself, about how I treat people. Sophia nodded slowly. That's why I believe in second chances, but not third ones. I understand, Melissa said. I just wanted you to know what you did changed things. Not just policies, but people. We're better because of it. After Melissa left, Sophia stood at her window watching the lights of ambulances arriving at the emergency entrance. She thought about that night 3 months ago, how close she'd come to being turned away from her own hospital. It had taken becoming invisible to truly see what was happening within these walls. Sometimes the only way to understand the truth was to experience it firsthand. The changes weren't perfect. The work wasn't finished. But today, when patients walked through those doors, they were seen as people first, not judged by their clothes or their appearance or their ability to pay. And that was exactly what Reed Memorial had been built for. If you've ever been treated differently because of how you look, you know exactly how this feels. The question is, what will you do about it? Like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments, have you ever had to become invisible to see the truth?